idea, you're going to naturally want to do it unless you just don't like the guy. Yeah. That's a good question. So anyway, moving on, here we're verse 25. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, this is verse 25. 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. This was what you'd said. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. And they carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. So, who did the killing?
The butchers, Simeon and Levi.
Simeon and Levi, yeah.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the idea that God told him, God told him to do this. I have a real told Levi to do this. What's that?
And gave them the power to do it, yeah.
Well, okay. I find that just completely unacceptable, because how is this a fundamental principle in Torah is eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Yeah.
Meaning the punishment against you, the judgment against the punishment for the judgment against the punishment that you do, the judgment that you get,
Yeah.
should be equal.
Yeah.
It's not one eye and the whole city has to give up their eye.
Yeah.
This is a rape. In the worst case scenario, you deal with that with a rape. You don't destroy a whole city because of that.
Yep, I agree. I agree. But you have we have a rebuttal here in a minute. We'll let Andrew go, and then you can rebut that.
No, that's what I'm saying, though. That would be the exception, is if the city was complicit in accepting the crime as being okay, I don't know, some way, shape, or form, and the convening authority would then be complicit and therefore criminal as well. I don't know. That's just my only exception to the rule. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But my thing about the circumcision, this is what I was going to say earlier, but I held off on, is as a man, as a man who's received a surgery down there before, I know how much pain it can be suffered in trying to run, jump, things like that.
Or have a sword fight.
Huh?
Or have a sword fight.
Or have a sword fight.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not wrestling with anybody. I know that lots of ice is involved, and they didn't have ice.
Yeah.
So my point is, the circumcision, the last concept here is that the circumcision supports the enemy. Because all of the men decide, hey, we're all going to get this receive the circumcision. There's no way they're going to be efficient. I mean,
yeah.
It hurts. It's extremely painful
sure.
at the age of 30. Like you said, what would it take for you to do it at 30? I paid somebody to do what I got done.
Yeah.
That was, I think that's the dumbest thing on earth, pay somebody to put you in pain, but whatever.
That's what dentists do. Yeah.
I was just at the dentist today. I paid him for the pain too. Anyway, yeah, so you get the point. I mean, there's your answer. They obviously were they knew ahead of time, like, haha, we've done this as children. We've seen
Simeon
adults
and Levi
do this.
knew what they were doing. Yep.
Yeah.
So I want you to rebut John. I like all these discussions.
Andrew, I'll just say one word on that. If someone's trying to kill you, I think you'd overlook that pain. I think you would. Well, I don't know. If someone's trying to kill me, I think I'd still pick up a sword no matter how much it hurt. Right?
Yep.
But, yeah.
Be that as it may.
But I think the bigger issue that God had to correct here is they were about to mix the seed, and that had to be stopped. And that was the issue about killing the whole men, is that they didn't want the Canaanites are to be wiped out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But was this, and this is where I think we're really going to disagree, is because was this a God-ordained way to accomplish that goal? See, because, whoever brought up the thing about how this does not look like an appropriate punishment, for the crime that was committed, that's true. And God accomplishes His goals Now, he does accomplish his goals through the sin of people, but there's no way that you can say that this was the way that God would have had it happen, given his choices. I'll tell you where I go back with that. I go back with Jacob when he lied to Isaac, lied to his father, and said, yes, I'm Esau, bless me. Now, I know that God would not have said to Jacob, you need to go lie to your father so that he can get tricked and give you the blessing. So I don't know how he would have done it, and I don't know how he would have done this either, but I'm convinced that he wouldn't have allowed it to happen. So, but that's just my opinion. Okay.
I can accept the argument that David's making, and I think this is what you were asking before. When they made the offer, did they really expect
Yeah.
them to accept the offer?
Yeah,
Once
that could
they've
be.
accepted it, now they're locked in.
Yeah.
And then if God's saying, all right, you knuckleheads,
Yeah. Yeah.
you put yourself
Be
in
careful what you wish for.
Yeah, you put yourself in a situation now where I'm going to tell you, you need to go out and destroy all these guys.
Yeah.
I think that judgment to go out and wipe out all the Canaanites, I don't know if we can apply that yet because we haven't really, those verses haven't come up yet. But, you know,
I agree that that line of thought makes sense, but there's nowhere in the text that indicates they look to God at all for help solving the
that's absolutely
situation.
true. As a matter of fact, the impression I get is this is primarily an act of, vengeful anger. Yeah, they're not. I hate to do this to you, but we have to do this to make this scales balance out right. Yeah. But it looks like, if you read this carefully, and you guys disagree with me if you think this is wrong, but it looks like Simeon and Levi were the primary murderers, if you will. But everybody, all the boys, kind of got into the, oh wow, look, there's some free stuff here, and because it says, what does it say? It said,
Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy.
27, the sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. So they came upon the dead bodies. Who were those? Those were the men who had just been circumcised, and the reason they were dead was because it says in the sentence before that Simeon and Levi killed them, right? So, but the rest of them went over there and looted the city. So it looks like all the sons were involved.
So the civil laws that we spoke about earlier regarding rape or forceful copulation, however you want to call it, those relate to, this is how Israel will rule their land inside their borders, etc., etc. Usually other Israelites will be involved here as one side or the other, either the plaintiff or the defendant in the matter. And this is how you will do it, and witnesses, etc., etc. We're talking about Israel is the victim because of his daughter. The nation, as it were, becomes the victim of another nation's act of viciousness. In this case, because really they were a nation, but there were just a handful of them.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, the Hebrews were literally just a handful of people, but
Well, I
they were
agree.
already a nation in my view. So this is an act between nations. This is an act of war. This is not a civilly or criminally. You know what I'm saying? This is not something that's just you go into a criminal court on. This is an act of war to them.
Well, you can talk about, there's other stories, not necessarily biblical, but like
justification for their actions is what I'm getting at.
like the Trojan War, right? The Helen of Troy and all that stuff.
Helen of
It's
Troy,
a similar kind of a thing. Nations go to battle. Heck, the killing of Archduke Ferdinand in World War I. People do things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess my thing is that we're making these assumptions. I'm making the assumptions too, by the way. That the actions of Jacob's children are somehow unbalanced for the crime. But we're not looking at a criminal code here. We're looking at you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, well, yes, it does. But the thing is,
it's not necessarily agreeable. But
okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
to use your example of Ferdinand, the problem with that was you had all these treaties that all these nations had that triggered all of a sudden.
Yeah, you're right.
I think the whole situation foreshadows Babylon. And if you look through Isaiah, like over and over again, like God sends the Syrians in as his weapon of destruction to kill in very similar way for idolatry and whatever. And if you look at what happened with the church, it's like almost a
Absolutely.
mirror
Well-
image, only the ending hasn't happened yet.
Yep. I think it's, let's see, I'll try to say this in a reasonable way, but I think history proves beyond doubt that God uses nations to judge other nations. Okay? The nations that tend to be most blessed and most successful and most long-lived are those that tend to have order based on biblical principles. And the ones that don't tend to last as long aren't. Dictatorships, whatever you want to say. So I think God used the Israelites to bring his judgment on the Canaanites, just as you said he used the Assyrians to bring his judgment on the northern kingdom of Israel, and he used the Babylonians to bring his judgment on the southern kingdom of Israel. He uses nations to judge other nations. It's all over history.
So after the golden calf incident, the Levites judged their own nation, their own people.
That's true.
So it's not surprising that they wouldn't have any problem executing judgment on the Shechemites.
Fair point.
So with what you said, he brings nations against nations to bring judgment. I agree, because that's repetitive through the scriptures.
Yep.
And he says, in the last days, I'm going to bring a people against you that have no regard for life, mother, baby, anything. They're a barbaric people. When you think about that in light of what's happening in the Middle East and
Yep.
what people are doing, those very things, again, it shows he does bring a people against people
Yep.
to bring judgment. And
Yep.
so we have to always remember whose hand is at work in the current crisis.
Yep. Yep. And the bottom line is, things aren't different. God's working the same way he always has.
And he uses nations against Israel too.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Okay, so then we get to this last part, verse 30. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." So this would imply, number one, Jacob didn't know they were going to go do this, right? You agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And number two, he didn't like the idea. I get a good old Jacob. I mean, his character always seems to come out. What's his first thought? These guys are going to kick my rear end. They're going to kill us for this. What'd you guys do? You went, it was like you kicked over a hornet's nest. This is
Well-
kind of what he's thinking.
So there was a rape, which is a bad thing, and your reaction was genocide.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Let's go to the next neighbors and see if they want to enter into contracts with us and do business.
Yeah.
You think that's going to go over well with that reputation?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No. Well, and of course, he's right. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. I mean, they certainly could. And now this goes way against what you were thinking. If it is true that what Levi and Simeon did was not what God intended them to do, then Jacob would have no standing to go to God and said, help me, protect me. Because God would basically be able to say, well, you did this. This is, whatever happens here is because you guys went out with malice aforethought and killed a bunch of people that you shouldn't have done. My opinion. Anyway, Jacob's unhappy. He's scared. That's a typical Jacob response, right? I'm afraid. Man alive, you've made my life difficult.
I would be too.
Yeah. But then, this is so cool, the last verse. But they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? So,
Well,
what's their response to Dad?
They're,
Go ahead.
my argument is they don't understand the principle of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Well, you could say that. But the thing is, that what it shows me more than anything else is it's proof beyond the shadow of a doubt of the fun in Jacob's dysfunctional family. You
What
know,
happens-
because basically they say, I don't care what you think.
What happens to the sons happens to the father, or what happens to the fathers happens to the sons.
They basically told him, you know, well, you weren't going to do anything about it, is kind of what they said, right?
Yeah, they're challenging his authority. They don't respect it. Is that fair?
They're challenging his authority, and that's a good point. Because, and so I guess the reason I take that back, or I play it back, is that we're going to find out, of course, that in just the next chapter or two, that good old Joseph is the fair-haired son, right? And it is real clear that even at this time, Joseph's probably 10 or 12, I don't know, but he's not a big, you know, we could have a great discussion on whether or not Joseph was a participant in looting Shechem.
He didn't pass his bar mitzvah yet.
Yeah, but anyway, I guess my point is that these guys already know that they're not favored in Jacob's mind. They already feel like they're second-class citizens. So, and we know that, you know, poor old Leah went through all of her whole life feeling like, gee whiz, I wish I could get Jacob to love me like he does Rachel, and it never happened. So, I mean, you know, I don't, this may sound harsh, but I don't have too much trouble faulting Jacob for that. I think he should have been a little more even-handed with this whole thing, because it's real clear from that one verse that his sons by Leah, are ready to rebel. They're ready to challenge him at any turn.
So I have a theory, if we can allow me to read ahead a little bit.
Go ahead.
So why, I don't know where it says it, but he says to Joseph, he is the son in his old age. My theory is that when he was with Laban, he had very little opportunity to teach these children that are now rebellion to raise up in the right way. He's running around doing whatever
Keeping sheep.
Laban wants to do.
Yeah,
You know, he's changing my wages 10 times and all
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And so, and plus he doesn't have the world experiences yet that he will have when he has the opportunity to raise Joseph up at a younger age.
Yeah.
So
You could be right.
Joseph is getting the benefits of how to be raised up properly, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get at.
yeah.
And the other ones didn't.
Yeah, get the benefits of being the youngest.
And along with that too, Leah had a lot of bitterness, and her kids, it's influenced them. You know, it's
Yep.
gonna breathe into them. So.
Yep. So is there any other thoughts? It's great how they just stick this one little whole episode. This is like a, you know, season 2, episode 4 or something. It's just a self-contained little unit here. But there's a lot of stuff in there. If there's any thoughts? I realize there are plenty of open ends, plenty of things that you can't say for sure, but you can sure see the seeds for a lot of stuff that's coming. Go ahead.
Well, I would just say Jacob's troubles continues,
Yeah.
right? It isn't just with Laban, then Esau, now it's the Shechemites,
Yep. And what's been at the
or what used to be the Shechemites,
Yeah.
I guess.
what the word that was used here in verse 13, and we can look at the Hebrew word. I don't know what it is, but because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully. That's the word that follows Jacob around everywhere, is deceit, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes me think about our politicians. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's all with a motive. They got some end objective they're trying to accomplish. Yeah. Well, next week, oh, I know what let's do next week, just for something fun. Next
Do you have a
week,
question?
go ahead.
Your hand was up.
One of the things that we end up doing, we end up
You want
talking
the Hebrew
about.
word?
No, well, go ahead.
The
for
Hebrew
what?
word?
For what?
Deceitfully.
Yeah,
Mirma.
mirma. Okay.
Mirma.
Mem, resh, mem, something.
Mem, resh, mem, Allah. Or hey.
Hey, mem, resh, mem, hey. Next week, as a special challenge, it says in chapter 35, verse 8, now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak below Bethel. So it was named Alon Bakuth. Yeah, that's the assignment. See if what you can find out about Deborah. That verse always has fascinated. Beg your pardon? This is verse 35, chapter 8, or chapter 35, verse 8.
This is the first place that word is used.
Yep.
Mirma is the first place is right here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's a root of something else, and it's,
Yeah.
you know.
Maybe that's something you can go look at.
What?
Did you-
The word mirma, the deceitful, and they said, and he said, thy brother came with subtle, oh, wait a minute. I'm wrong. That's Genesis 27:35. That sounds like what Jacob did to Esau.
Well, that was deceitful.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the first occurrence.
Okay,
That was the
first
first occurrence.
All right, fine. So it's same word there. Good. Mhm. Are there any other thoughts or comments? I hope this was okay. Sometimes I feel like we go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I like it. I learned something. I hadn't thought about a lot of these things, but it's funny how you read the stuff, and the Bible is so it's so dense in a way. It's very terse, and you end up with a picture of what's going on. And a lot of times it takes somebody else to say, well, I thought it meant that. Like we were talking about whether Jacob was around when the boys were making their presentation to Shechem and Hamor. I always thought they were. I mean, I just thought that's the way it was, but I can certainly see that you could read it and think not. So, anyway. But there's a lot of stuff in that chapter. Like I say, there's a lot of things to think about if you ask me. Okay, I'll close in prayer. Father God, thank you very much for the evening. Thank you for this particular chapter. It's got some interesting questions, some deep thoughts. Makes us ask questions about how you want us to behave and the things you want us to do. Help us to think on these things as we go through the coming week and to guide us and to put them together so that next week we can move on and see what you have in the next chapter. In Yahushua's name, amen. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.